There are cases that shake you, not just because of what happened, but because of how it happened, how long it went on, and how many people looked the other way or worse, participated. The case of Sam Nordquist is one of those cases. It began quietly, the way so many tragedies do, with a young person, a hopeful connection, and a trip that was never supposed to be anything more than a visit. It ended in a field in upstate New York, and what happened in between is something investigators described as among the most disturbing things they had ever encountered. Sam Nordquist was 24 years old. He grew up in Red Wing, Minnesota, a small, close-knit town that sits along the Mississippi River, the kind of place with a main street you can walk into end, where the changing of seasons is something you feel in your bones, and where people tend to know each other's names. Sam was a transgender man, and like so many young people trying to find their footing in the world, he had built connections online that meant something real to him. The internet had given his generation a way to reach past geography, past the limits of small-town life, and find people who understood them. For Sam, that world of online connection felt genuine. It felt like community. It felt like belonging. That's how he met Precious Arzuga. They had been talking for a while, long enough and warmly enough that Sam came to think of her as his girlfriend. They messaged each other. They built something, or at least Sam believed they were building something. When Precious extended an invitation for him to come visit her in New York, Sam said, yes, the way you say yes when you're 24 and you believe in people and you think the world is capable of rewarding that belief. He packed a bag. He told his family he'd be back. He made the kind of easy, ordinary promises that young people make when they don't yet know what's waiting on the other side of the decision. He arrived in upstate New York in September of 2024. The area he was heading to, Hopewell, New York, near the town of Canandaigua in the Finger Lakes region, is a quiet stretch of the state. It's the kind of place that feels far from everything, where properties sit apart from one another, where the nearest neighbor isn't necessarily close, and where the winters close in early and stay long. Sam was planning a short visit. He had a life back in Minnesota. He had family who would notice if he was gone too long. The plan was never to disappear. The plan was just to go and come back. He didn't come back. For a while, his family still heard from him, or believed they did. Messages came. Contact continued, at least on the surface. But families know their own. They know the rhythm of how their people communicate, the words they use, the warmth that comes through even in a short text, the small specific things that are impossible to fake if you really know someone. And slowly, across those weeks and then months, something started to feel wrong. The messages were off. The contact became sparse. The person on the other end of the line felt less and less like Sam. His family reached out. They tried to get answers. The answers they got were not enough. By early 2025, they were no longer just worried, they were afraid. On February 9th, 2025, Sam Nordquist's family reported him missing to the New York State Police. It was an act of desperation and love, the last tool available to people who know something is wrong and have no other way to reach across the distance. Investigators took the report and began doing what investigators do: tracing movements, following leads, identifying locations, looking for the thread that would explain where Sam had gone and why no one had seen or heard from him in the way his family needed to hear from him. That thread led them to Hopewell, New York. It led them to a property connected to Precious Arzuga, the woman Sam had traveled across the country to meet. And it led them to a location called Patty's Lodge, a property that would become central to what investigators were about to uncover. When police began searching and gathering evidence connected to the area, what they found did not look like the end of a missing person case. It looked like the beginning of something far more serious. Investigators shifted the direction of the case almost immediately. This was no longer about finding a young man who had gone quiet. This was a homicide investigation. What prosecutors and law enforcement alleged had happened to Sam Nordquist between December of 2024 and February of 2025, a period of more than 2 months, was not a crime of sudden rage or a single terrible moment. It was, according to investigators, sustained, deliberate, extended. Authorities alleged that Sam had been held captive at the property, unable to leave, cut off from the people who loved him and from any avenue of escape. During that time, they said, He was subjected to repeated and escalating physical violence. He was beaten, not once, repeatedly over the course of weeks. He was subjected to sexual violence. He was psychologically tormented and humiliated. He was denied basic necessities, the kind of deprivation that is not accidental but weaponized, used to break a person down, to rob them of the energy and the will to resist. Investigators described what had allegedly been done to Sam as methodical in its cruelty, and they described their own experience of working the case as one of the most difficult of their careers. People sometimes wonder, when they hear about cases like this, how something like that goes on for so long without someone stopping it. How do weeks pass? How do months pass without intervention? The answer, as uncomfortable as it is, often comes down to isolation, to control, to the way that abuse operates in enclosed environments where the victim has been cut off from everyone who might help them, and where fear has been distributed among everyone in proximity to it. Sam was far from home, in a place he didn't know, with people who had constructed the reality he was living inside. He had no easy way out. And then there were the children. This is the detail that, for many people who followed the case, cut through everything else. Prosecutors alleged that 2 children, a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old, were present in that environment during the period in which Sam was being abused. Not just present in a distant or tangential way, but allegedly forced to witness or in some capacity take part in what was being done to him. These were children who should have been going to school, doing homework, sleeping safely, building the kind of ordinary childhood that give you something stable to stand on for the rest of your life. Instead, they were allegedly placed inside one of the most disturbing environments imaginable, exposed to violence and cruelty at ages when the mind is not built to process it, and the damage it leaves behind is deep and lasting. That detail, more than almost any other in the case, speaks to the full scale of what investigators said they were looking at. This was not just a crime against Sam. It was a crime against everyone inside that space. In February of 2025, Sam's body was found. He had been left in a field near Canandaigua. The discovery confirmed what investigators had feared and what his family had been dreading through every day of that search. But the crime, according to prosecutors, did not end with his death. Authorities alleged that after Sam died, multiple people who had been present did not simply leave or call for help or turn themselves in. Instead, they allegedly worked to move his body and to conceal evidence of what had happened. The decision to cover it up, to hide what had been done to him, meant that Sam's family had to wait even longer for answers, and it added additional layers of criminality to an already devastating case. 5 people were arrested initially. Precious Arzaga was among them. The woman Sam had crossed the country to be with, the woman he had trusted. Jennifer Quijano was arrested. So was Kyle Sage, Patrick Goodwin, and Emily Motika. All 5 were charged with murder-related offenses in connection with Sam's death. As the investigation continued and prosecutors worked through the evidence, the number of people facing charges eventually grew to 7. The charges were serious: first-degree murder, kidnapping, conspiracy, and additional offenses tied to what had been done to Sam and to the efforts to conceal his body afterward. Because Sam was transgender, the question of motive became one of the most loudly asked questions in the national conversation that followed. Was this a hate crime? Was Sam targeted because of who he was? It's a question with enormous weight, not just legally, but morally. Hate crime designations matter because they acknowledge that some violence is not only about the individual victim, but about the identity they represent, about sending a message to an entire community. Law enforcement, in the early stages of the investigation, said they had not found evidence establishing an anti-transgender motive. They noted that Sam and the suspects knew each other, that there was a relationship in place, or the appearance of one. The motive, they said, was still under investigation. That answer frustrated many people. It didn't close anything. It left open questions that might never be fully resolved. The case proceeded through the courts. A grand jury reviewed the evidence and returned upgraded charges, with prosecutors pursuing first-degree murder, the most serious category of homicide charge under New York law, carrying the heaviest possible consequences. In later proceedings, Precious Arzuga entered guilty pleas to charges including murder, kidnapping, aggravated sexual abuse, and coercion-related offenses. The plea represented a legal acknowledgement of what had happened to Sam, even as no court resolution could fully account for the reality of what those months had looked like inside that property in Hopewell, New York. The case drew national attention for reasons that are not hard to understand. It had elements that each, on their own, would have been enough to make it significant. A young man traveling to meet someone he loved and never coming home, a prolonged period of alleged captivity and abuse, the involvement of multiple suspects, the exposure of children to extreme violence, a family thousands of miles away fighting to find out what had happened to their son, and an investigation that law enforcement described in terms that made clear they themselves were shaken by what they had uncovered. Together, those elements created a story that was impossible to look away from and equally impossible to watch without feeling the weight of what it represented. This was not an abstract tragedy. This was Sam Nordquist, 24 years old, from Red Wing, Minnesota, a son, a person who believed in people, who packed a bag and got on a road and trusted that the person waiting for him on the other end was who she said she was. His family, throughout everything, through the search, through the discovery of his remains, through the court proceedings, kept returning to the same insistence. They wanted the world to know Sam, not just as a victim, not just as a case that made national headlines, but as a person, a real person with a life and a hometown and a family who loved him. They spoke about who he was before any of this happened, because they knew that once a story becomes about the worst thing that ever happened to someone, the person can get lost inside it. Sam Nordquist deserved to come home. He deserved the ordinary life that 24-year-olds are supposed to get, the mistakes and the growing up and the decades that stretch out in front of you when you're that young. He deserved better than what he got. And the least that can be done, now that what happened to him is part of the public record, is to say his name clearly and to remember that behind every detail of this case was a human being who did not deserve a single moment of what those months allegedly contained.